It's time again for another installment of the basics, and I'm going back to the X-Files CCG today because I have been asked how exactly to make a deck for this game. Now, it's been a long time since I last put together a deck for the X-Files CCG, but I'm going to show you the critical elements involved with deck building because, as I've mentioned before, this is a different type of CCG. Let's get started. There are many important things to consider when you're building a deck for the X-Files CCG, but first and foremost, and I've mentioned this before, the object of the game is to figure out your opponent's X-File card while he is doing the same to you. Now, the X-File is the first step in deck building. You have to decide the X-File you're going to choose for your deck and the direction you want your deck to go. So there's several different categories these fall in. You have Primordial, Alien, Evolutionary, Occult, and Government. That gives you an idea of which direction you're going to be taking when you start building a deck. For example, if you go with something that's more along the lines of Alien, obviously you're going to have Fox Mulder as an agent, you're going to have a lot of cards that deal with paranormal and things like that. Government brings up those shady characters that operate behind the scenes like the cigarette smoking man and others. And once you pick your X-File, that will determine the agents that you assign to your deck that will do the investigating for you. As well as the fact that you don't want to have too many agents that deal with just one thing. You want to have 3 to 4 agents that are varied in their skills because you're also going to be figuring out what your opponent is doing. Once your agents are selected, then you can start moving on to the other cards that are important for an X-Files deck. Mainly, you're going to choose your sites next, then your events, because your events will determine the outcome of the game, then your bluffs and witnesses, and also your adversaries, because that's going to be what you're going to be throwing at your opponent during gameplay, aside from the event cards. And then, of course, your combat, because there's going to be a lot of fighting and a lot of conflict in the game, so you have to be prepared, which leads you into your equipment cards. And I've mentioned before on previous episodes the importance of equipment cards depending on the deck you're building. But everything falls into place once you start with the X-File. And it's not something you can rush. You really have to think it through when you're choosing an X-File, because that'll determine the type of deck you build. Once you get that done, you can move on to the next stages, as I've mentioned. Because the X-Files game relies on investigative skills and thinking more than anything else, that usually determines the type of agents and other cards that you have available that are going to go into that deck. You have to be able to investigate, ask questions, and figure out what your opponent's doing before he figures out what you're doing. That will in turn lead you to his X-File and to victory. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.